speaking of conservatives and the Conservative Political Action Conference, Southwest Virginia, Republican from the 9th District, Congressman Morgan Griffith. Congressman, great to have you.
Great to be with you.
Okay, let's get to Dhs Funding. That's everybody is talking about that now. We just had your colleague on, Congressman from the 5th District, Robert Hurt, that basically said there is no change in the Senate, that basically if Harry Reid was still the majority leader, the exact same thing would have happened. What's going on?
Well, what we have, and Robert hit it right on, what we have is a rule, I call it the modern filibuster rule. It's really the cloture rule. It says you can phone it in. All you have to do is say, I'm not for a bill. You phone it into the majority leader's office, and then it takes 60 votes to even bring a bill up. Now, I will tell you that that rule is a perversion of the democratic principles upon which our republic is based. What it says is that in order to take care of any business, you have to have 60 out of 100. Our founding fathers are spinning in their graves with that concept. 60 out of 100 to get anything done. Now, it's one thing if, like Jimmy Stewart, in the great movie, standing in the well of the Senate and giving a speech. If you want to stand in the well, if Harry Reid wanted to stand in the well of the Senate and give a speech for, 78 hours or whatever he wanted to do, more power to him. I wouldn't want to see that cut off because that's a recognition of the minority's right to say their piece. But to not even allow the bill to come up for debate, to not even allow the bill to be voted on, and you're just sitting, at some fancy restaurant eating your fancy steak dinner, that's not the way the Founding Fathers envisioned it to occur. And I will tell you, a number of your listeners are probably thinking, oh, yeah, well, where were you when the Democrats were in control? I wrote a piece on this in my weekly column, which you, I believe, get,
yes, sir.
Back after the elections were lost by the Republicans in 2012, and said that even though I knew the Democrats would do things that I didn't think they ought to do and that I disagreed with, that this rule ought to be done away with because it was damaging the Republic. So this is not a new tune for me. I believe you have to set the process up in the proper manner, and then the system will work. The system is not working because the Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, refuse to go forward on a majority rule and require a supermajority just to say they're going to pass a resolution that people ought to brush their teeth. That's ridiculous.
Well, Congressman, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think this is referred to common language as the nuclear option. So what, if you could just walk us through the scenario, what would the Senate have to do in order to just get rid of the 60 cloture vote rule that they have? So this bill, which was passed in the House of Representatives, could simply come up to the floor for debate. How would this happen?
Well, they would have to go in and change the rules, and technically under the rules that they've adopted already, what they should have done was gotten rid of it right at the beginning. They should have, anybody could see this coming, which is why I also wrote an article on this after the 2014 elections and before everybody was sworn in. When they passed their rules in the Senate, they should have abolished the rule then it would have only taken 51. Technically, under their rules, it requires a supermajority in order to change the rules. That being said, anybody who's been around the parliamentary process for a while knows the majority has the power to come in and change the rules if they. Now it's a bloody mess, but they have the power to come in and change the rules anytime they want to. And in this case, because it is so damaging to the republic, here we have a president taking unprecedented actions that he himself said he did not have the authority to do. He's taking these actions. He's thumbing his nose at the United States Congress as a whole, and it's going to take some unprecedented action to undo it. And what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to say, whoops, we made a mistake. They need to push the button on the nuclear option. Reid did it for presidential appointments. It's not like It is unprecedented. And they need to do that to get this thing moving, because otherwise what we have is Harry Reid, as Robert Hurt said, still runs the Senate. We cannot allow that. That's what the voters voted us in to take care of. Those of us in the House are doing our job. We've sent a bill over there that does what the American people wants. It says, okay, Mr. President, you know you don't have the authority. We now have a court that says you may not have done it the right way anyway, and we're not going to fund your illegal actions taken without the authority of Congress. That's what we're supposed to do. We've done that. We need the Senate to do the same. They can't do it without kissing the ring of Harry Reid. He is in the minority at the will of the American voter, and our senators ought to realize that this is a mess. It's going to affect every single issue, and if we don't want to have Barack Obama doing whatever he chooses to do for the next 2 years, they've got to change that rule. And, you know, I will tell you this. It's easy to go out and give nice speeches, but I believe that the senators and the Republican senators and the Democrat senators are cowards for not tackling this issue, and the reason is that they're afraid in 2 years they'll be in the minority and they'll want this power. Well, sometimes he who lives by the sword has to die by the sword. We won the elections for this 2-year period. That's all the American people gave us in the Senate. They need to show that they can govern, and if that means using the nuclear option, I think they need to do it, because they certainly will be in the minority if the American people don't believe they can govern the way that they're supposed to.
I think there's times of crisis where you have to act, and it's almost like the Republicans in the Senate afraid of they might be in the minority in 2016 rather than playing to win. They're playing not to lose. If they do what they need to do, they're going to keep the majority. Right now, it's like they're backpedaling. Let me just conjecture. Is it fair for me to conjecture that there might be Republicans in the Senate that don't want to change his rule so they don't have to go on record?
Well, I think that's part of it. I don't think that's as big a concern as the fact that they're worried they might be in the minority and they'd like to have this power themselves in 2 years or 4 years. But I do think there are some who don't want to go on the record. I mean, that's one of the things that protected the Democrats and why they like this rule so much, and why Harry Reid didn't use the nuclear option on policy, because his candidates did not have to take positions on a lot of things. And I submit to you that we might have had a different result in Virginia if Mark Warner had been forced to vote on something like cap and trade. That would have turned the voter turnout up in my district, I can assure you, had he voted for cap and trade. But he was able to dodge so many issues, and, you know, he's a nice guy, and people know he's a nice guy, and so they say, well, he's a nice guy. And Gillespie, bless his heart, didn't have a whole lot of votes he could look at, because the Senate doesn't take a lot of votes because of this rule.
Right. So going forward now, it appears to some that this is just a shell game, that everybody knows that at the end of the day, DHS isn't going to shut down. There'll be something that Boehner will figure out, and then there's going to be a separate bill to stop Obama's illegal amnesty. That's going to fail. So it really, people are looking at this thing now and they're saying, you know, it's really a showboat affair, and there's no real action to get this illegal amnesty stopped.
Well, I will tell you that we're doing everything we can in the House. We have a difference of opinion, at least at this very moment. I'm not in agreement with what I believe to be the strategy of the Speaker. However, I want to make this clear. I am absolutely convinced that the Speaker is willing to do whatever he can. Our problem is that we have been thrown under the bus by our Senate colleagues, and we have been willing to make the fight. We were waiting for reinforcements. Those reinforcements arrived, and then they said, yeah, but, you know, we have to have our key in a collegial manner, so we can't engage in a real fist fight. Well, it's time to stop going over places like CPAC and making the pretty speeches and standing up every now and then and giving an occasional speech in the Senate. I want to see some of these senators get into a good old-fashioned legislative fist fight and duke it out with the Democrats and give us what we need on the Senate side. We've got plenty of warriors, including the Speaker, who are ready to fight in the House, but you can't fight an effective battle with one hand tied behind your back, and right now that rope is being held by our majority leader, and Harry Reid is pulling it.
Where are they going to have a hill to die on? Where's the line in the sand?
Well, That's always an interesting question. I think we're very close. It may be today. It may be 3 weeks from now. Stay tuned. We'll find out. I don't know when the Senate's going to have a hill, but the House is ready.
Were to not be funded, let me ask you this straight out. Would the sky fall?
Would it need to fall? No. The fear, however, is that our president, just like he wouldn't let World War II veterans go to parks when the full government shut down, parks that were unattended generally, they put up barricades to keep them out, who on the Parkway, the Blue Ridge Parkway, both in North Carolina and in my district in Virginia, wouldn't let people go to the concessions, private businesses who pay a fee to the federal government. No federal employees. They took federal employees and blocked the entrances, had the lights going on the police cars, and wouldn't let people go to these private businesses because they'd shut the government down. Had nothing to do with the government shutdown. This president is vindictive, and he will do something like saying, okay, you can only have a minimal crew of TSA inspectors and make people line up going out the door to get an airplane flight. That's the kind of game this president plays. He does not care about the average American citizen. He only cares about his political gain, and that's what people are concerned about. I think it's atrocious, and I think we are in it's not as big a crisis as the war between the states, and we've had some other crises throughout our history, but we're at, in my lifetime, I'm the same age you are, 56, this is probably the most significant constitutional crisis that we've had.
You know, the other thing, Congressman, and I'm going to keep asking this question. President Obama, when he did the second amnesty, not the Dreamers, the second one, I think it was in December, he specifically said on television these illegals that he was not going to send away, that he was going to give them the opportunity to work, get out of the shadows, etc. He specifically said they would not be eligible for government entitlements. Now we find out the director of the Internal Revenue Service testifies. First he says they're not eligible, then he says they are. Now we find out that any of these illegals that broke the law that came in the United States, haven't paid any money in taxes, can go back and file for the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is up to $36,000 that they can obtain from American taxpayers. So what do you say to the person right now in Southwest Virginia, driving to work, punching a clock, trying to make ends meet, trying to put food on the table, living paycheck to paycheck, playing by the rules, that now someone else who broke the law at least 2 times is now going to get up to $36,000 of his or her money? What do you say to that individual?
I tell him I'm doing everything I can, that I'm fighting like crazy up here to stop this president and his bad policies, his policies that are detrimental to the United States of America. And there's a point you haven't even hit on. This is even worse. I mean, you've got the money, then they're eligible to take the jobs away from American citizens. And keep in mind, I have high unemployment because the president's environmental policies are killing so many of our jobs in the area. I have high unemployment around the district. That's unbelievable. Now we're going to give these people an opportunity to come in and take away jobs from American citizens who are unemployed because of this president's policies. But it gets even worse. You know, I've been a long time part of what's sometimes called the courthouse crowd, and I have heard this story a couple of times, and one of them is coming from somebody I know who's an immigration lawyer. You actually are better off if you've committed a crime. You move up the line under the president's policy, and so recently, a police officer stops somebody on the highway. It turns out they're an illegal alien. They jump out of their car and start going, I'm drunk, arrest me. Because if they get convicted of a DUI, they move up in the line to get their paperwork processed by the federal government based on the president's actions. So not only are we giving them money, but we give them that money, and I don't know how much it is exactly. I know it's up to that amount, but I don't think most people will get the $36,000. But notwithstanding that, they get some money, but you actually get moved up. You get rewarded if you've committed some kind of a misdemeanor crime that won't get you deported, but gets you a status within the system that puts you in favor or ahead of people who have tried to come here legally, have done it right. you get in front of them if you're a criminal.
Unbelievable. I mean, the stories get worse. I've got about 2 minutes. Congressman Morgan Griffith, Republican, 9th District of Virginia, that's Southwest Virginia. Congressman, yesterday, net neutrality. We've got 3 bureaucrats appointed by Democrats. Nobody elected these people to anything. Basically turning the internet into a government utility, like welcome back, Ma Bell, if you like Obamacare and the post office and the old telephone system, you're going to love net neutrality. Nobody asked for this. Nobody clamored for it. It looks to me like George Orwell, 1984, all over again, government takeover of the free internet. I think the thing is just, it's very fishy to people. Nobody can even understand the darn thing. I mean, how does this happen?
Well, I wish I could discuss it with you in detail, but they wouldn't let anybody see the plan except for the commissioners. And I think Commissioner Ajit Pai said it correctly when he said this is adopting a solution that won't work to a problem that doesn't exist using legal authority it doesn't have.
That about sums it up, right?
That sums it up.